Over the blue line, around Del Vecchio. He shoots, he scores! Dave Keon.
When we'd go into Toronto to play the Leafs, just rings in my brain. Number 1 star.
First star.
Dave Keon. Davey was the number 1 star game after game after game.
Over the line, cutting in on goal. He can score!
What I really admired most about him, he would be the guy staying out after practice, continuing to work. He was one of the hardest workers.
Leafs trying to hang on, leading 2-1 as Stan Mikita failed to get away.
He was very, very interested in being an offensive player, but he cherished his defensive role, and he probably did his defensive duties as good as anybody who ever played.
He came to play every time. He killed penalties. He skated miles and miles every night. Tireless.
In the NHL of the 1960s, fear had a face. Massive fists, brutal body checks, and a willingness to draw blood. But one man redefined fear entirely. Dave Keon, 5'9", barely 160 pounds, nicknamed the Little Beaver, never threw a punch, rarely took a penalty, and still made the greatest players in the world feel completely helpless. Stan Mikita, one of the most decorated centers in history, summed it up perfectly. He was too gentlemanly for me to start anything, but too good for me to beat on the ice. That was the trap. The year was 1967. The Montreal Canadiens were the most dominant force in professional hockey, loaded with talent, experience, and one undeniable leader wearing the captain's C on his chest. The captain of Montreal stood 6 feet 3 inches tall, weighed over 200 pounds, and had already won multiple Stanley Cup championships. Every opposing coach knew the same truth. Stop the captain of Montreal, and you had a chance. Fail, and you were finished. Punch Imlach, Toronto's head coach, gave Dave Keon a single instruction before the Stanley Cup Finals began. Don't let him out of your sight. What followed was one of the most suffocating defensive performances in playoff history. Keon, nearly 6 inches shorter than his target, used pure speed and an almost supernatural ability to read the game to cut off every passing lane, every skating route, every option available to the most gentlemanly man in the NHL. The captain of Montreal never saw it coming. The giant of Montreal, a man built like a force of nature, found himself chasing shadows. The numbers told the full story. Montreal converted only 3 of 29 power play opportunities throughout the entire series, a stunning collapse for a team built around precision offense. Keon did not just slow them down, he dismantled them. Toronto won the Stanley Cup. Keon received the Conn Smythe Trophy as the most valuable player of the playoffs. The giant of Montreal later admitted he had never felt so physically and mentally exhausted by a single opponent. Punch Imlach, rarely a man of generous praise, wrote in his autobiography, "Keon's forechecking and penalty killing was perfect in a way that was astonishing." If the 1967 finals proved Keon could neutralize the greatest player in the world, then April 9th, 1964 proved something even more unsettling. He could destroy you on your own ice. Game 7, the semifinal series between Toronto and Montreal. The venue was the Montreal Forum, the loudest, most intimidating arena in all of hockey, where visiting teams came to lose and home crowds came to bury them. Toronto needed a win. Montreal needed only to defend their fortress. Keon scored all 3 goals in a 3-1 Toronto victory. The first came from pure instinct inside the scoring zone. The second, the one that silenced the entire building, was a short-handed goal, scored while Toronto was playing with fewer skaters than Montreal. The crowd did not boo. They simply went quiet. The kind of quiet that only arrives when something genuinely shocking has happened. The third goal sealed the game into an empty net. After the final whistle, reporters surrounded Keon. He gave them one sentence. "I scored those goals for my father. He is very sick, and I told myself I could not fail tonight." Gordie Howe, who would later become Keon's teammate in Hartford, said it plainly. "We should all be so lucky to know how to play this game as well as Dave Keon." Dave Keon's fearlessness did not live only on the ice. It lived in boardrooms, in newspaper columns, and in a silence so long it lasted 4 decades. Harold Ballard, the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, was among the most powerful and controversial figures in the history of professional hockey. Through the early 1970s, Ballard publicly attacked Keon in the press, questioned his leadership, and repeatedly refused to pay him a salary that reflected his value to the franchise. In 1975, Ballard forced Keon out, and then set the compensation demands for any transfer so unreasonably high that no NHL team could afford to sign him. It was not a retirement. It was a professional exile, engineered by one man's ego. Keon's response was not anger. It was something colder and more permanent. He left for the World Hockey Association, accepting years away from the sport's highest level rather than surrender his dignity. When Ballard died, Keon did not return. When the franchise held ceremonies, Keon declined. When reconciliation was attempted in 1991, Keon responded with complete clarity. I realized the new management was no different from Ballard, and I don't need them. For 40 years, he held that position without wavering. It was only in 2016, when the organization had genuinely changed, that Keon finally came home, on his own terms, as he had always done everything. Dave Keon did not survive penalty kills. He weaponized them. In the 1970 to 1971 season, Keon set an NHL record with 8 shorthanded goals. Goals scored while his team was already at a disadvantage. The logic of the game said this should not be possible at that frequency. Keon made it look routine. The mechanism was speed. The moment an opposing defenseman turned his attention forward, expecting to attack, Keon was already moving in the opposite direction, faster than the defense could react, faster than the situation allowed for. Teams would enter a power play believing they held every advantage. Keon converted that belief into a fatal mistake. Stan Mikita, the Hall of Fame center from the Chicago Blackhawks, described it with the kind of frustration only a direct victim could produce. He is the only man I know who can score on your net when you think you have your biggest advantage. That record set in 1971 remains one of the most remarkable individual achievements in Toronto Maple Leafs history, one that even the greatest modern forwards in the franchise have never approached. In the autumn of 1979, Dave Keon returned to Maple Leaf Gardens. He was 39 years old. He was wearing the jersey of the Hartford Whalers, and he was the opponent. 4 years of exile in the World Hockey Association had not diminished him. If anything, it had sharpened something. He skated onto the ice that Halloween night and received 3 standing ovations from the Toronto crowd. The same crowd that Ballard had expected to move on, to forget, to let go of the man he had tried to erase. Ballard sat in his seat and could do nothing. Keon told reporters before the game, "I have no bad feelings toward the players, but playing against the Leafs will be very different." He continued playing elite professional hockey until the age of 42, becoming the oldest active player in the league at the time. His former teammate and Hartford colleague Gordie Howe watched him every night and never stopped being amazed. Davey never gets old. He still makes those checks, still takes that puck, like he is still 20 years old. Dave Keon did not learn to play hockey the way most professionals did. At St. Michael's College in Toronto, a priest named Father David Bauer and a coach named Bob Goldham gave him a framework that would define his entire career. If you can score 3 goals every game, do not worry about defense. But if you cannot, you must learn to control your opponent. Keon could not always score 3 goals, so he learned something rarer and more dangerous: the art of angling. Angling is the practice of using speed and positioning to steer an opponent into a corner, a wall, or a dead zone where the puck becomes useless. It requires no physical confrontation. It requires only the ability to think several seconds ahead of another professional athlete moving at full speed. The terrifying element was that opponents never felt trapped until it was already over. They believed they had the puck. They believed they had options. Keon had already removed every one of them. He explained his philosophy with characteristic calm. Why would I exhaust myself wrestling with someone? Your legs feel like lead after 70 games a season. My job is to use my head and my skates to take the puck, not to punish the person carrying it. Journalist Dick Beddoes captured it precisely in 1964. Do not look at the scoreboard to judge Keon. Look at what his opponents did not do. That is where his greatness lives. In 2016, a panel of experts and supporters voted Dave Keon the greatest player in Toronto Maple Leafs history, above Turk Broda, above Tim Horton, above Sil Apps, above every name, every era, every legend the franchise had ever produced. What do you think of Dave Keon? And which NHL legend do you believe deserves to be covered next? Let us know in the comments below.